Michael, thank you so much for joining me. Tucker Carlson, last week, gave an interview repeating all the popular anti-Ukraine conspiracy theories that are viral on social media, many pushed, it seems, by Russian bots. I want to go through as many as we can in the next 5 or 6 minutes, starting with this one about Ukraine's President Zelenskyy, a claim repeated by Donald Trump himself. Have a listen.
Zelenskyy would say he was democratically elected.
Well, he's not democratically elected. He's passed his term.
Well,
and so by what authority does... hold on, let me question.
Go ahead.
By what authority does Zelenskyy negotiate on behalf of his country, rule his country? He just put his main political opponent under indictment and froze his personal funds under internal sanctions, the security services of Ukraine.
Sounds familiar, doesn't it?
I don't know.
We just went through the same thing in this country.
Sounds like dictatorship,
what I'm saying
by the way.
No.
Tucker Carlson says Zelenskyy is a dictator, is he?
Not at all. He's not a dictator. He was elected in 2019 with a very big popular mandate. 73% of the country voted for him. It was the north, the west, the east and the south of the country. Everybody voted for Zelenskyy because he was promising an end to the war that was already going on and also to tackle corruption in the country. Now, the thing is that his term has expired, but the Constitution of Ukraine requires that when there's a situation of war, which there is at the moment, that elections can't take place. Let's also remember that the United Kingdom during World War II for 10 years didn't have an election, and Churchill was never elected by the population of the UK during the war. So clearly it's a furphy. So the thing is that I think that people in the US administration...
Michael, I would add this. Sorry. I would add this, that Zelenskyy was elected by a bigger margin than Trump was, and he retains a higher popularity in Ukraine than Trump has in America. Then there was this one, that Russian President Vladimir Putin, on the other hand, is not a dictator.
No, Putin does not have absolute control of his country, and there are all kinds of potential rivals. I'm definitely more sympathetic to Putin than Zelenskyy.
Michael, your response?
Oh, this is absurd coming from Tucker Carlson. The thing about Putin is when he came in 1999, the first thing he did was get rid of the media moguls, and they were exiled. Berezovsky, who was in the UK, was later murdered. Then he murdered his political opponents, like Boris Nemtsov in 2015, and more recently, Alexei Navalny. He's murdered something like 170 journalists in Russia. So, yeah, definitely not. There's no real opposition left in Russia at the moment. There's just a fig leaf which is there to fool people that there's some kind of democracy going on. There's nothing going on like that. In fact, I would suggest that people read Peter Pomerantsev's book, which is called Nothing is True and Everything is Possible, which looks into the way that the media in Russia, which is totally controlled by the state, just manages the situation, manages these fake parties and opposition candidates who aren't real. The man is a dictator.
Then there was this one that Zelenskyy is actually so corrupt, Michael, that he is selling American military aid to drug cartels and other criminals. Listen.
What he has is a lot of NATO weapons. And to your second point, he has absolutely, as a matter of fact, the Ukrainian military has sold those weapons on the black market around the world.
Now, Michael, when he was pushed there, Tucker Carlson said he could give no evidence of his theory apart from an unnamed guy that he refused to name, that he said had personally bought weapons from Ukraine on the black market. What do you make of this?
Well, Zelenskyy was almost killed on the first day of the invasion when the special forces of Russia got into his office and had to be killed in order to protect him and his family. Ukraine, as a country, was a big weapons producer. It was about 8th in the world in exports even before this war started. Right now, Ukraine is producing about 50% of all of its weapons. It's producing 4.5 million FPV drones this year, 3,000 ballistic missiles. This is a country that produces half of all its weaponry. About 25% comes from the EU, the other 25% comes from the US. So they think that just the US weapons are being sent off to Mexico. It's absurd, this whole idea.
It comes from a misunderstanding, I believe, that in fact America is funding American weapons manufacturers who are living high on the hog with some of the profits there. Yeah. And Ukraine is actually is not getting half the weaponry that people are talking about. And well, finally,
there was a statement. There was a statement.
You want to hear even some.
Okay.
No, I'll just finish with this one before we run out of time. This is important.
Okay.
I hear even supposed conservatives repeat this one, that Russia didn't start this war, Europe did, or Ukraine did, or NATO did, with plans to move right up to Russia's borders with weapons, including in Ukraine. How could poor Putin not fight back? Have a listen.
We have a nuclear-armed power, largest nuclear arsenal in the world, that is fighting for its very life, that is aligned with China, okay, which is the largest economy in the world. Russia's concern was that Ukraine remain not part of NATO. They want to control Ukraine to some extent. It's their neighbor in the same way that we want to control, I don't know, Canada or Mexico.
Michael Lawriwsky?
Oh, yes. NATO had nothing to do with this. If NATO hadn't existed, there would have been another alliance of, say, the Baltics, Poland and Ukraine, and the invasion and the war probably would have occurred still. When NATO expanded into Finland, the Russians were not concerned. So it's really due to Russian aggression. In fact, in 2003, Putin told his top elite that it was intolerable for Kyiv to exist outside of Russia. And his former chief political or economic advisor, rather, Andrei Lyanov, he heard this, and he's been talking about this for years, that NATO has nothing to do with it. A man that really knew Putin very well, that it's all about Russia trying to take Kyiv, destroy the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian nation, not just the Ukrainian state. It's a genocide that Putin wants to impose on Ukrainians. And we've seen that in the occupied territories, where, for example, if the Russian troops come across Bibles written in Ukrainian, they are burned. So that's what they want to do. That's the goal that Putin has. It's nothing to do with NATO. If NATO had been there in 2013 or 2014, this war would not have happened. And in fact, in that time, Ukraine was neutral. It was attacked. And because of that, the Ukrainians went from being 60% against NATO to 80% for. You can't blame them for that.
No, absolutely not. And in fact, Putin's version of Mein Kampf, where he actually spells it all out, was written about 3 or 4 years ago, or 5 years ago, rather, where he actually says Ukraine is Russia. That's really his bottom line.
That's right. That's right.
Look, thank you so much for that, Michael Lawriwsky. I mean, that was very valuable. I really appreciate it.